Morning, ladies and gents. It's the 22nd of November 2025, and another NATO UK update hitting mainstream this week over the last 2 or 3 days that deserves, I think, in my personal opinion, it just deserves a little bit more attention. So I'm going to be throwing up some interesting maps just to support this content for you and prevent you from falling asleep, I suppose. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, for many, this video is probably going to be a little bit boring. We're not talking about a possible nuclear war, but instead, what the hell is a Russian spy ship doing off the coast of Scotland? So mainstream, giving you no information whatsoever and just more clickbait bullshit. So instead, we're going to take a deep dive into this article. And the only reason for this is because as preppers, we need to keep an ear to the ground and identify possible threats so that you and I can prepare accordingly. I haven't done one of these types of videos since the Heathrow electricity substation fire or fires, where I went in deep to analyze that event and also the power outages across Europe around about the same time. So that would have been Spain, France, Portugal, and Belgium. From that research and analysis, I learned quite a lot. It opened my eyes and kind of broadened my mind in terms of sort of identifying those vulnerabilities, those threats. And my root cause analysis were down to, or my result was that those were cyber attacks on critical infrastructure here in the UK. And this video is going to be the same because we're looking at real content and real facts, coupled with real threats and, quite frankly, real news, as opposed to any bullshit on mainstream. So I'm not bigging myself up, guys, but you will learn more from this video than you'll learn from any sort of mainstream news channel about this particular event. I know this is going to be boring for most of you, as I've just said, guys, but as a prepper, certainly for me, I want to know about these threats. What do they mean? And how do I prepare for those outages? If you have a general conversation, let's say over this weekend, whether that's going to be in the pub at home or work, all you're going to hear is you'll hear about the Russian spy ship shining lasers into the faces of RAF pilots off of the north coast of Scotland. And that, ladies and gents, is going to be the strength of it. However, after watching this video, you will be in a much better position as a prepper, understanding something about the ship, its intentions, the vulnerabilities in terms of assets here in the UK, and what threats that exposes to to you and I, so that we can prepare. That's the whole purpose of this, isn't it? So I'm just going to crack on. What I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to throw up some maps and some content. So, I'll keep this screen sort of lively, but they are interesting. Well, it depends. It's interesting. It's interesting to me. So it gives me a better understanding of the picture. Right. Let's start. The Russian research and survey vessel, the Yantar. And it's exactly that, guys. It's registered with these two categories built for surveying research tasks. Others will be telling you that it's spying, it's collecting information and number crunching, reconnaissance, and so on. There's actually no difference between those two sets of words, survey and research, and spying and intelligence. The difference being the category or the type of data that's being collected. A ship built, or it wasn't built in 2012, it was launched in 2012. I believe it took 2 years to build, and its purpose is it's an intelligence collection ship built specifically for the Russian Navy. So research and survey ship it's just a user-friendly cover. Guys, I'm going to spend 30 seconds. I'm just going to give you some information on what the ship has been up to, just so you can kind of get a picture of what it's been doing and where it's been at. 2015, the Yantar was seen off of the coast of Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, and in Norwegian waters in 2016, monitoring all traffic along the Norwegian coast, apparently. 2016, the Yantar anchored off of the coast of Greenland. 2017, it was in the Mediterranean near undersea cables linking Israel and Cyprus. In 2018, the Yantar was in Argentina helping with the rescue efforts in trying to find the ARA San Juan. It was a submarine that went missing. She was back in the Mediterranean in 2018 off the coast of Syria. And then Trinidad in 2019. Now, I'm not sure whether that was a natural disaster and the ship was helping there. 2020 took the Yantar off to South America again. That was Brazil, near submarine cables by the Brazilian Navy, stationed in Rio de Janeiro, off the coast of Ireland in the UK in 2021, following the expected route that the Yantar followed. It was the route that the Celtic Norse submarine communication cables take, as well as being stationed in the English Channel for at least a day. Now, I remember that it was just sat there in the English Channel and God knows what it was doing. Guys, when I say submarine cables, these underwater seabed cables are better known as submarine cables because they lay under the water surface. So don't, they've got absolutely nothing to do with submarines. They are seabed cables, mainly used for transferring data, and that's it. They've got nothing to do with submarines, but that's what they call them. To finish this piece off, in 2023, as she was back off of the coast of Norway. Now, guys, when I say these locations, just bear them in mind because they are significant, for this video. So off of the coast of Norway, in 2024, the Yantar was escorted out of the Irish Sea, where she was sat between the southwest of the Isle of Man and Dublin, where lies cables that carry data for large companies like Microsoft and Google. January of this year, 2025, the Yantar was spotted again in British waters close to Cornwall. Guys, this is another significant location, home to many submarine cable connections to the mainland that being the UK, which I'll show you in a minute. And now over the last couple of weeks or so, I would say the last 4 weeks, the Yantar, not for the last 4 weeks. The Yantar hasn't been roaming around the north of England in Scottish waters for the last 4 weeks, but it's been untraceable and recently seen off the coast in Scotland. And it is also said that it's mapping the seabed again up there in the north of England for submarine cables. The vessel came within 44, 45 miles of the UK coastline this time round, close enough, but not quite close enough to enter British international waters, which I believe is 12 miles. So all the Navy can do at the moment is just survey the Yantar. So the Yantar's activity is nothing new, guys. But what makes this gain additional media traction, let's call it media traction, is the use of these lasers being pointed at RAF pilots in the area. And that's a direct provocation. So that's just a little bit of info on the ship and its activities. That's what it's been doing over the last few years, and it's doing exactly what it was built to do. I just let me bring up some of these maps, and then I can sort of better explain what we're talking about here. So this is the ship. You can see the ship. You've probably seen it, pictures online, wherever you pick up your news. But I'm just going to the Yantar survey ship. Let's call it that for now. It's said to be collecting sort of data as it maps the seabed for undersea cables. That's what it's. That's the message. That's the story we're getting. Mainstream are only ever going to be giving you a fraction of the information, guys. Whatever's necessary to sell papers and news, as it were. But 18 days ago, the Yantar was last picked up in the Baltic Sea off the coast of Estonia and Latvia on a marine tracker, which is a global shipping. It's a public tracker. It's what you see on the screen at the moment. Anyone can look at it and track, commercial vessels on the ocean surface. It's similar to Flight Radar 24, where you can track flights and planes. And this platform is in real time, meaning that the Yantar. Okay, actually, I just want to show you something. Okay, that beacon in the middle there that's flashing, that is the Yantar. And that's the Yantar in the Baltic Sea. However, if I put my pointer on that, there's a date there, which is the 2nd of November. So that's when this shipping tracking platform last tracked the Yantar, which was in the Baltic Sea 18 days ago. I just want to get that across, guys, because that's quite significant, really. But for anyone that's unaware, the Baltic Sea, what's now better known as NATO's pond, because 8 of the 9 countries coastlining with the Baltic Sea are NATO members, with Russia, obviously not being one of those countries. So Russian vessels can freely swim around the Baltic Sea, as they've got St. Petersburg coastline in the Baltic Sea, as well as Kaliningrad, which is sandwiched between Lithuania and Poland. But both of those locations at the moment would be significant NATO tier 1 targets, I would say. So if it all pops off between NATO and Russia, those two locations are likely to be taken out. And the reason for that is, well, one of the reasons for Kaliningrad is because it's been reported that over 50 Russian naval ships are located in ports in Kaliningrad, which is a large chunk of Russia's northern fleet. And St. Petersburg, obviously Russia's second largest city to Moscow. So I'm just going to show you something here, guys. I'm just going to get a bit of interactive content going. Let me just bring up this tool. So as I've said, guide, in the middle there, you've got like a flashing beacon. This is in the Baltic Sea. That's the Yantar on the 2nd of November. If you can't see it, let's just highlight that a little bit more. Okay, that's the Yantar. Now let's have a quick look at. Let's get rid of that. That's what the ship looks like. That is the ship. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so let's just zoom out, just so I can give you a little bit of an overview of the Baltic Sea and its significance in this conflict going forward. So as I've just pointed out there, we've got the UK in the bottom left there. Now the red triangles on the screen there, guys, are just cargo ships. I've only highlighted cargo ships because if I highlight all vessels, then we wouldn't see the sea. There's so many vessels, on this ocean surface around the world that you wouldn't even see the sea. So I've only got the cargo ships up there at the moment. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to show you the route that this ship would have to take to get to the UK. So guys, it would take, let me just show you this on the screen. We're going to go from where its last reported location was to the UK. So it would take approximately 2 to 4 days for the Yantar to travel from this position to the UK, some 600 to 700 nautical miles away from the UK, at an average speed of, let's say, 15 to 20 knots. So my guess is, because we can only guess as a member of the public who cannot sort of track vessels that haven't got their transponders sort of turned on, it was probably collecting all sorts of intel within the Baltic Sea before heading off to the UK. But let me just show you what this looks like. If the Yantar left that location and went straight towards the UK, it would travel south out of the Baltics and out into the North Sea up towards Scotland, where it's been reported to have been seen. Okay, guys, 2 to 4 days. However, it's had its transponder turned off for 18 days. So my guess is, oh, and by the way, it's still turned off. But this is probably what has happened over the last 2 weeks. And when I've drawn this route, I want you to kind of just picture it, guys, because on the next map that I bring up, it's going to be relevant. So that's 2 to 4 days. That's how long that would take. However, they're 2 weeks in, over 2 weeks in, nearly 3 weeks in. So if I'm these guys on this intelligence gathering ship, I'm going to probably head south. I'm going to do the coast and collect data off of the Latvian, Lithuanian coasts. I'm going to pop into Kaliningrad and say hello to some of my mates. And then I'm going to come out and then just scan the coast of Poland. And we'll probably touch northwestern Germany, just see what's happening on their coastline there. I'd cut across then to southern Sweden, make my way north, scanning the coastline there, all the way up towards Finland. I would probably check some of the Finnish coastline out whilst heading towards St. Petersburg. I'd pop in, have lunch with mum and dad, and then I'm back out again. And off I go, making my way around the Estonian coastal line just for measure. And then I would head south towards Poland and out towards the Denmark and Swedish Strait, which cuts through here, whilst I'm collecting data on both of those countries on my left and my right, heading north towards Norway. Now, Norway isn't a member of NATO, however, it's worth collecting intel from them guys as well. Scanning the coast there, and then I'd probably head south and pick up some additional coastline intel from Denmark, and then obviously we'll get western or northwestern Germany, pick up some intel from the Netherlands, and then head north through the North Sea towards Scotland. Now that would be a couple of weeks worth of intel gathering, in my view. But moving on to the Yantar and the undersea cables, or subsea telecommunication cables. Have any of you guys ever seen undersea cable maps? All of the cables shown in this next map that I'm going to show you in a second are data cables. So they're fiber optic cables. They're transmitting large chunks of data from one country to the next, better known to you and I as the internet. If we look at the north of Great Britain, I'll show you in a second, off of the coast of Scotland, there's actually not much, if any, data cables hitting the Scottish mainland. There are cables linking the smaller islands. That's the smaller islands in and around the UK. So from the mainland of the UK to these smaller islands, providing them with data links, and also out towards the north, heading towards Iceland and Norway. When the Yantar has been spotted in and around the Irish coast and off of the coast of Cornwall, back a couple of years ago, I think it was, that would raise more intelligence eyebrows, because looking at this cable map that I'm going to show you in a second, you'll see that those areas have large amounts of data cables connecting to the UK. And these are data cables that are going out to the US, Southern Europe, the Mediterranean, Africa, and the Middle East to a degree. But let's just get rid of this. Let's get rid of these lines. Just remember those routes, guys. I'm just going to show you this map. It resembles something similar along the lines of the London Underground tubes, or even the New York Metro. But what you can see there, guys, it's not a very good map in terms of, we can see clearly the cables traversing from one country to the next, but what we can't see clearly is the actual landmass. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom into this, and I'm going to have a look at, similar to what we were just looking at in terms of the vessels, that being the ships. I'm not sure how clear that is, guys, on the screen. But the Yantar, I think I said, was around about there when it was last picked up. And then it turns its transponder off. Now, I'm just going to come out of this. Let me zoom in, guys, because it's going to be important to do this. Okay, that's similar to what we were looking at just now in terms of the vessels. Now, I'm going to draw that same route, the one that's taken the Yantar 2 weeks to sort of do. And I just want you to see what happens here. Let's use a red. We'll go for it. So the Yantar was last spotted in this area of the Estonian sort of coast. And I think I may have said that, if it was me, I would travel off up north, have a look at the Estonian coastline, gather some intel, go through the Finnish Gulf towards St. Petersburg, pop in and say hello to my mates, and then off we would come back, looking at the coast of Finland as we do so, coming back round, heading towards Sweden, and then would cross down the Swedish coastline, heading further south. I'm not sure if this was the route, guys, but it's going to be similar. Heading towards northwestern Germany, we'll pick up a little bit of their coastline, and then some of the Polish coastline. And then what I'll do is pop into Kaliningrad, have a couple of beers with my mates, and off out we come again. We'll pick up intel from the Lithuanian and Latvian coastlines, as well as a little bit more of Estonia. Then what we would do is we'd head south, out of the Baltic Sea, passing through the Danish and Swedish Strait, which is a very thin route there, heading north, with Sweden coastline being tracked on my right into Norway territory, covering the coastline of Norway. And just for good measure, I'd head south, tracking and collecting data on the Danish coast, northwestern Germany, sorry, and then the Netherlands. And then I would head north and it's Scotland. Now, you might be thinking, okay, yep, that's cool. But what I'm going to show you now is what's actually happening in this picture. This ship is scanning the seabed. So from leaving here, it's scanned all of these cables. It's scanned the cables that are going from Finland to Estonia, Estonia back to Sweden, Sweden to Finland, and so forth. And that ship, if this was me, and remember, guys, the transponder is switched off. Okay, so it will be tracked by satellites and intelligence agencies. That's fine. But what I'm trying to say, on the public domain, that transponder is turned off. And as it's swimming around the Baltics, it's crossing all of these seabed cables and scanning the seabed to identify their locations. It gets down here and it covers all of these cables here. It hits the coastlines of all of these Baltic countries, heads south. It comes through between Denmark and Sweden and picks up all of those data cables there. It picks up this lot here. It picks up a load off of the coast of Norway, along down the side of Denmark. Anyway, you know where I'm going with this, guys. Basically, what I'm trying to say is this. The transponder was turned off 18 days ago whilst it's swimming around the Baltics. And what it's done during my predicted journey is that it's crossed over 32 different seabed or submarine cables, data telecommunication cables, whatever you want to call them, guys. What I'm trying to say here, guys, is that it's been at it, and it not only has it been at it for the last 18 days. That ship was built in 2012, and it's been around the world. It's already scanned and mapped all of these cables, guys. But the most significant bit here is, or not the most significant, but there's an important bit here. Let's just get rid of that route. I'm just gonna zoom in just a bit more into Scotland. The Scottish waters up here. Okay. Now, in terms of data cables, nothing really. There's a couple of cables there going off towards Iceland and Norway, I think I said. We got a couple of cables going around the tip of the UK from Norway off to Ireland and various other places. But what I'm trying to say, guys, is that there's no real activity there. When the mainstream are telling you that it's scanning the seabed for all of these critical data cables, it probably isn't. So we need to have a look at a reason why, or what else is likely to be sort of picking up. Okay, guys, so I just wanted to point that out because it is quite important, really, just to get the full picture of what's going on. Off of the back of this, though, I do have one question that I would be sort of asking. So when the Yantar left the Baltic Sea, leaving Finnish, Estonian, and Lithuanian waters whilst passing past Poland, Denmark, and Norway on its way to the UK waters, I'm just wondering if any of those countries actually reported on their mainstream sort of news channels similar threats from the same vessel. As I pointed out, the ship would have crossed over 30 different seabed cables between a number of NATO countries before arriving to the North Sea. I haven't heard anything, guys. Again, that could be local news and only broadcasted on local sort of TV channels. But I haven't seen anything online. I didn't see Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Denmark, Norway, or any of those other countries actually reporting the presence of this ship. So we just need to kind of take, some of what's being said with a pinch of salt. But the only way we can do that, guys, is by understanding the bigger picture. The UK's digital lifeline depends on approximately 60 undersea cables that carry about 99% of the international data traffic into and out of the UK, believe it or not. These critical assets face increasing threats from deliberate sabotage as global sort of tensions have risen over the last 4 years. The UK's internet system relies almost entirely on sort of subsea telecommunication cables to connect to the outside world. Well, because we're an island. So that kind of, that makes sense. These cables, they carry data that power the economy, everyday communications, and critical services. So, for many years, the UK's internet connection has been based on international sort of stability and commercial efficiency. And as the geopolitical outlook worsens, now is a good time. And when I say now, I don't mean this week and last week, just because we've seen, the Yantar roaming around. But now, as in the last 3 or 4 years, is a good time for our governments, not just here in the UK, but across the whole of the NATO alliance, to be taking stock of our sort of security and resilience arrangements. And the reason why I say that, guys, is because of the security vulnerabilities that lie within this critical asset. Um, there is a limit to how much cables can be protected from the enemies who are using things like civilian vessels to accidentally drag anchors over the seabed and damage these cables. There are particular vulnerabilities around the UK, outlining islands as well. And that will be across military cables and also the financial sector. So there's a lot of banking transactions being transmitted from country to country down these cables. And military cables is communications for military services. Onshore, you've got the infrastructure, which is a further concern. So we've got cables. When they come out of the sea, guys, they come out ashore via what they call landing stations. These are similar to substations on the electricity grid, the ones that were on fire down in Heathrow and in other parts of the country, which are basically they are beach joints. That's what they call them, really. They join the cable that run along the seabed to the land. So these are beach joints that are sort of located within landing stations, which remain vulnerable, certainly to unsophisticated sabotage. And what I mean by that is things like vandalism, similar to sabotage events that could have happened at these electricity substations over the last couple of years or so. Many onward terrestrial links cover, well, when I say cover, so basically what happens is from these landing stations or these beach joints, from that point, those cables will connect to other network cables under the ground for the most part and will traverse towards data centers. These are data centers that Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and various other large multinational companies will host their kit and provide you and I with services, whether that would be Office 365 or other cloud services. But those locations, those data centers are vulnerable as well, creating worrying sort of levels of concentration. These all present risks for, how can we put it, low level sort of deniable sort of attacks, which, while not causing national disruption, would be costly, it'd be provocative and probably hard to prevent. And whilst I mention more local than national level disruption, I mentioned that there are approximately 60 tier one Seabed cables connected to the UK. Actually, you can see this. Let's have a look at this map quickly. The UK, I don't know if you can see it. This is a really bad kind of map, to be honest with you. The UK is there. Now, if you look at all the cables in Scotland, not many at all. There's a couple connecting off to Norway, Europe, but nothing major. What you have got is, oh, let's get rid of the arrow. That wasn't supposed to be there. What you have got is, sorry, just changing the color. You've got down on the west side there, in and around the Irish Sea, one of the locations that the Yantar's been seen. And also here off the Cornish coast, again, another location. Those two locations, as in the west of the UK, are critical. And that's where most of your cables are connecting. And what you'll see, guys, is that those cables are heading west to the United States, south to southern Europe, further south around Africa, back up into the Mediterranean and the Middle East and so forth. Okay, guys. So, these cables, in terms of business communications and survivability, economically, are absolutely paramount. But I just wanted to sort of point that out. But what I'm trying to say is, whilst I mention more local than national sort of level disruption, There's approximately 60 tier one seabed cables connected to the UK. And this is only my view, guys, but for a national disaster, I would expect half of those cables would have to be sort of taken out for there to be a national disaster. I don't know because I don't know the criticality. I know it's critical, all of it, all of the data, but I don't know how many of those cables would have to be taken out to bring the whole of the UK or the country to a standstill. So that doesn't rule out the loss of internet for you and I in a given area for a given period of time, whether that's a week or two or even a month. As with any critical infrastructure, one would expect fault tolerance measures and failover sort of mechanisms in place for such outages. That's a given, and we can only sort of sit here and hope that those measures are in place. Guys, that just brings me on to just a tiny bit. I promise, just a tiny bit of history on this. It's going to be 30 seconds. I know most aren't interested in this, but it's like I say, we need to understand the bigger or the biggest picture we can. But the importance of these cables for the British span back to the early 1900s, if not before that, when the British pursued sort of retention in maintaining its communication with the rest of the British colonies. That would have been Canada, Australia, India, and Africa, and parts of also of America, or some of those American islands. The Seabed Cable Network goes back as far as 1866, when the successful operation of the Transocean submarine telegraph network changed. It changed international communications forever, really, with amazing rapidly sort of submarine telegraph cables sort of being laid across the oceans, reducing communication lags from days to weeks, or days and weeks to minutes. The British government quickly grasped the strategic value of submarine telegraph networks, to control and administer the British Empire at that time. As the Imperial Defence Committee noted in a secret, it was a memo in 1910, and it was titled "The Maintenance of Submarine Cable Communications Throughout the World in Time of War is of the highest strategic and commercial interest of every portion of the British Empire." So a decision was made at that time to connect all of the colonies and possessions with submarine telegraphs, or these cables. For security, it was further decided that all landing points, those landing points on land that I just mentioned, needed to be on British territory, and all cable landing stations staffed by British telegraphers. Since maps of the time frequency showed the British Empire in red, I'm going to show you actually an example of this. So what we're doing actually, this original security principle or strategy was known as the all red line. Let me show you what that looks like. So we have gone from that was the communication back there in the early 1900s, shall we say, the all red line, they called that for obvious reasons, to what it looks like today. So, this is a critical network, guys. It has been around for 160 years, nearly. So in view of the increasing threats, though, as I keep saying, the potential war unfolding in Europe, we have to accept the fact that our enemies, certainly those against the UK, if you're living in the UK, will look for other methods. Actually, not just the UK, guys, anywhere in Europe. I'm using this as an example because I live in the UK and we're an island, and I'm talking about the vulnerabilities to us as an island. But other methods of attack, and again, I mentioned a couple of days ago in my last video, just because we're an island surrounded by water, don't think for 1 minute that this country is safe. In fact, we're definitely more vulnerable to other forms of attacks, such as hybrid warfare and notably cyber attacks and sabotage. It doesn't help that the UK relies on said subsurface cables at almost 100% to function. So for this country to function, we rely pretty much everything that we hope for on these data cables. And as a nation, our economic dependence, our strategic vulnerability and ongoing growing threats should be at the forefront of everybody's minds, especially our governments. Um, Apologies in advance, guys. But I'm just going to ask, I want to ask you this question. If the internet is switched off right now, what impact would that have on you and your family? I think I asked a similar question in my last video. If the electricity went off, in your home and you couldn't leave the home or whatever, what impact would that have on you? But to better understand how that answer, or how to, for you guys, how to answer that question, we have to understand what those impacts could look like and whether or not you as a family unit rely on those said services. Now, I know that everybody relies on the internet. That's it's just the way of life, and that is it. Um, but I'm just going to quickly categorize to you the significance of the internet. Starting with communication. So I'm not teaching you how to suck eggs, guys, but let's just go through this. The internet is the foundation for modern communication tools like email, instant messaging, voice communication. So that's going to be VoIP for your phone calls and video conferencing, connecting people and organizations globally in real time. Let's take a closer look at this, actually. I mentioned in my last video that there are approximately 5.66 billion people around the world on social media, two-thirds of the world's population. Now, for many, not having access to social media might not mean much, but how about all of those businesses that utilize and rely upon social media to function, as well as the millions of individuals relying on social media as a primary, and in many ways, their only source of income? And we can't forget about the millions or billions, shall we say, of people that would sink into depression, my guess is, and a whole world of other mental health sort of issues off of the back of not being able to access social media. Social media, and again, this is just my view, guys, but social media has and continues to destroy the human race in part. It's portraying a world that actually isn't real, and forcing the younger generation into bullshit virtual worlds, hence the massive rise in anxiety. People are so consumed by this virtual world that the very thought of having to deal with matters in the real world, it simply flips them onto their heads, guys. But there's a lot of benefits, okay? That goes without saying. Commerce and finance. So let's move on to online shopping, guys, or e-commerce, whatever you want to call that. Online banking, stock trading, and digital payment systems like PayPal, all relying heavily on secure and reliable internet connectivity. How about online shopping? I know that would have a psychological effect on my missus. I'm going to lower the tone just in case she's listening. But yeah, that would have a psychological effect on my missus, even though we can't afford to sort of buy much right now. She likes to window shop online, scrolling through the many, many pages, of whatever it is that's keeping a brain engaged. But online shopping, for everyday shopping, for businesses and personal use, losing online shopping as an industry tool will have a massive impact. How about online banking? Now, that's not banking on your PC or laptop, guys. This is more for me. Well, actually, yeah. I mean, you can't exclude that, but I'm looking at the apps. Certainly those on your smartphones, gone. How does that even look like for people that bank solely with Revolut, Monzo, Chase, and all of the others that don't have high street bank branches? If there's an internet outage, then what are you doing to access your funds? I mean, I have got one of those accounts, but I've got a normal account as well. But if I just had the one, I mean, okay, listen, paying bills and making payments, is one thing, but how are you actually getting hold of your cash? I don't even know what that scenario even looks like. So I'm telling you guys, there's millions of people out there that are simply fucked. If the shit hits the fan, and that looks like no internet for a given period of time. Information and education, yeah, information, certainly we all need information. That's what keeps us all going. Education, that's what keeps people alive and functioning, I suppose. It serves as a vast, instantly accessible global knowledge hub, providing access to news, research, academic resources, online courses and tutorials, which are there to support formal education and lifelong learning. No more online sort of courses or education. If you rely heavily on, or your provider only has online sort of courses, then school's out, which might be music to some kids' ears. But we've got to mention YouTube as well, guys, because they offer so much online educational content and upskilling videos covering almost pretty much every single topic that there is. Um, you've got trading. This would be stock trading. In fact, trading in pretty much all commodities. That when I say commodities, I'm talking about rice, coffee, gold, silver, digital currencies. So that could be crypto, oil, gas, and guys, I could go on all day about the list because everything is tradable, and most of it is tradable online. So global trading platforms now nearly solely operate online. Unless you're selling sheep and cattle at the local sort of, the local farms or whatever it is, on trading day. But this is all done over the internet normally. So economically, God knows what that would look like if there was no internet. Logistics and operations, guys, we rely on that every day for our shopping and for our goods and various other services. Businesses across all sectors use internet-based applications for supply chain management. What else is there? Point of sale systems, inventory tracking, and managing daily operations. Let's go back a little bit on some old school, but we all still use it today. And that is your email communication. The internet has made it possible for people to communicate with each other from anywhere in the world for years and years and years now, since the birth of the internet, to be honest. Being able to communicate and send and receive documents of all types. Businesses use email communication heavily still today, and it's always been reliable and a fast way to communicate. Employment and remote work. Well, since COVID, remote working is the thing. The internet enables remote working. Freelancing platforms. I've freelanced for many years as an IT sort of engineer. That draws in access to job searching and applications. If the internet's gone, you're not looking for that stuff. I think again, guys, it just depends on the severity of what's going on and what else is factored into this outage. If we've lost the internet, looking for jobs is probably towards the bottom of the list of priorities, as opposed to getting access to money from your online banking apps. Providing immense flexibility and access to those global talent pools, essential services and infrastructure, which is going to include things like critical public services. That's going to be healthcare, patient records, management, and things like that, certainly from hospitals and doctors. Government services, that's going to be your tax man, tax filings for your businesses and for whatever, HMRC here in the UK. Benefits claims, DWP, whoever deals with that, I don't know. Emergency services, critical. They rely on the internet. Energy grids, well, we know about that. We've spoken about it. Critical infrastructure. The transport systems are heavily reliant on internet-based infrastructure and data exchanges. There's the connection of certain ecosystems or the Internet of Things, IoT devices. They're going to be important to individuals, and it's going to be things like security systems, your CCTV that you can remotely access from work. You can look, you can view your cameras, thermostats. So you've got smart homes coming into the mix where you can control a certain functionality and features within a smart home before you even get home. And also connected vehicles. You can automatically or remotely put a car on charge, and anyway, the list goes on. Important, well, it depends on how reliant you have become as a family unit on those services. You've got to factor in the fact that if you lost the internet, what impact would that have on you? Entertainment and media has to come into it. And I'll tell you the reason why, guys. It's not important for me and probably many other people out there, but it is important, certainly for the younger generation. Because we're talking about streaming services for music, movies, and TV shows. Well, those three out of the window on an SHTF situation. Online gambling and gaming. Well, gambling is an addiction, and if that addiction's no longer there, what does that do to that individual? Online gaming. Yep. There's a lot of people that spend most of their days and nights gaming. If that's taken away, what does that do for their mental health? Social media platforms, as I just said, so the content sharing, is largely replaced traditional media consumption methods. So social media is a big thing. 5.66 billion people around the world, two-thirds of the world's population are tapped into social media. How many of them are actually relying on the content and the advice and the use and the business and everything else? If that's taken away, guys, what does that mean for you? Other areas that may not be impacting would be things like research, news. News for me, yeah, I don't watch mainstream news on the TV and I don't read the newspaper, so I rely on other sources. If there's no internet, that's gone. I said gaming, dating. Um, there would be a pause on learning and finding out anything new, not being able to keep up with the news that's in other parts of the world. Sat at home on your own without your potential date, playing Scrabble instead of Call of Duty on your Xbox. But believe me, guys, even the loss of those things would turn people's worlds upside down. Believe me, that goes without saying. So when we're telling, or when they're telling us about these seabed cables, the UK relies on them for 97.5% of its internet access to the island. And without it, you hopefully now know, that those are the impacts. That's just some of them, guys. That's and you're not gonna realize. You're not gonna realize until it's gone. So it's okay me yapping on about all of these things, and if we lose them, you probably want to know how to get around this. I mentioned this subject probably a month or two ago, and I still haven't got it in place. I'll be honest with you, I can't afford it right now, but we will have it in place by Christmas. So do you know what my answer is to all of these potential issues that I've just sort of pointed out or I've just mentioned to you? That's going to be Starlink. So Elon Musk's satellite internet service, let the Russians and the Chinese cut as many cables as they like. With a Starlink dish on your roof, that's pretty much problem solved. There are over 8,500 Starlink satellites orbiting the Earth in low orbit currently, with SpaceX launching new rockets into space loaded with sort of Starlink satellites every single week now. Actually, let me give you an idea. Um, what does that look like? Okay, that's planet Earth. If we are in a spaceship looking down at it, and all of those little dots are satellites of one way, shape, or form. So what I'm going to do, let's see if we can do a search for Starlink and then just bring up the Starlink satellites. Okay, it's dropped us straight onto that. Anyway, right, okay, for the UK, let's get over the UK. Well, I don't know, they might have heard about it, but they're definitely not selling it in your local broadband provider's shop or whatever it is. Okay, this is definitely a game changer. The UK in the middle of your screen there. I'm just going to zoom in. But the same applies, guys. Just because I live in the UK and I'm talking about the UK, these principles apply to everybody across Europe. Okay, so let me just zoom in. And what you'll see on the screen are Starlink satellites moving. This is now real time on the 22nd of November at 11 minutes past 9 in the morning. Now, in terms of coverage, if you live, I suppose, in the bottom half or the southern part of the UK, you've got those satellites going through space above your head in low orbit. For the north, but what you'll see these GS stations. These are if we've got them in the north. We've got one up in Scotland there, or have we? No, that looks like a satellite moving north. Okay, these are the green one. I'm not too sure what they must be Starlink. I don't know the difference between the green and the yellow dots. What I'm trying to say, guys, is that there's always satellites above your head. If those cables are taken out, those critical data cables, it doesn't matter. As long as you've got those satellites above your head, you're good, or you're in with a lot better chance of connecting to the internet. Okay, I just wanted to point out, guys, because I've mentioned us for two reasons now. I'm not happy with the provider that we've got at the moment, that being Sky Internet, and there's always going to be a restriction in terms of bandwidth. We're never going to have a fiber cable routed straight to my doorstep, so there's always going to be a restriction between my house and the closest exchange box. The rising tensions in Europe, and dodgy Russian spy ships off of the coast of the UK. I don't want to be in a position where, boom, we've lost the internet. So, that's the reason why I'm mentioning this, guys. Have a look at it. It is more expensive, and weigh that up against the reliance you have on the internet. That's not just for you surfing social media. That's everything, online shopping, banking, and all of those other things. So, guys, I just wanted to mention that, but you can see on the screen. I think the coverage for the UK there's Starlink coverage for the whole of the UK. Like I say, there's over 8,000. I think there's 8,800 satellites orbiting the Earth now. Okay, so you've got access in your camper van. Get yourself to the middle of the Sahara Desert and still get internet access. That's the reality of what we're talking about here. It's like satellite phones, exactly the same. Okay, guys. I just wanted to mention that because I think it's an important prepping tool for the future. That's all I'm going to say. Actually, before I finish off with this, don't think just because you're in the north of the UK that you're not going to get coverage. I'm just going to show you what the coverage looks like. I think those green did from west to east in some sort of not formation, but they're traveling in those satellites. We'll see what coverage we can get. Let's say, for instance, you are in the south. Yeah, let's face it. No, let's find a remote location like this one here. That blue is telling you the coverage. If I click on another one that's moving, that blue should get darker. What's that green one up there? So that green one there is north to south. That's your coverage. That's the whole of the UK covered just by 2 or 3 satellites. What I'm trying to say, guys, is just because you're or over the top of your head doesn't mean that the coverage isn't there. Let's click this one as well. Look at that. So just your dish connecting to those 3 sat signal. If the signal isn't so great down in the south there you go. It's going to connect to that satellite. So you can see the significance of what we're sort of saying there. Okay, I just wanted to mention that, guys, because some people are saying, yeah, well, we're up in Scotland and, by looking at your video, we're not going to get the coverage. Right, just a few more minutes of your time, guys. We're coming to the end of this. I just want to cover some protection measures in place, and then I'll summarize, and that's it. We're finished. So since doing this video, I've identified a number of other tier 1 counter value targets. That's commercial targets here in the UK. I have done a couple of videos on such targets across the UK. So go back and check them out. I won't mention them now. I've mentioned them before. Check it out. One other point to mention here, or vulnerability, would and could be the gas pipelines. They're pipelines that run along the seabed also, alongside those cables between the UK and countries such as certainly Norway. We get a lot of gas from those guys, where the Yantar, believe it or not, has been seen. So to destroy those pipelines would be an attack on the UK, depending on the location of the attack, that is. But gas providers around the world, they work together and interchangeably internationally in various areas, such as Norway, Denmark, and the Netherlands, also Belgium. But I'm talking about us and the UK. But an attack on those pipelines would also be an attack on those countries. So from a business perspective, that's probably not a good idea. Certainly if we're talking about those pipelines coming out of Norway. And because Norway isn't a NATO member at the moment, but I think if an attack happens anywhere in their waters, then it wouldn't be long before they joined the alliance. But I want to mention this, guys, because those pipelines make more sense. Actually, let's make this a little bit more visible. On the screen, you can see a map. We've got pipelines, gas pipelines. Now, I'm going to just take you to the north, and we're going to zoom in just a little bit. And I believe, let's say, for example, the Yantar is in this area. Okay. It would make more sense because there's no seabed cables, data cables of any significance up there. But what would make more sense is these. Okay, these are gas terminals. Those additional sort of T1, sorry about T1, tier 1 counter value targets are sort of evident here on the screen. I would say that those gas terminals, certainly the one in St Fergus in Scotland, definitely a critical terminal sort of out there, or sort of going out there towards those gas fields, and mainland Norway. Then there is the gas terminal at Easington, which is Yorkshire. There's around about there. There is another key terminal at Bacton in Norfolk, and then there's a smaller one in Teesside, and then a couple of others dotted around the western side of the UK, connecting Ireland with gas. But personally, if I was Putin, those gas terminals are key targets over the internet cables first, because there are 60 tier one seabed cables to, sort of contend with, whereas there's only six key gas terminals. If I'm an intelligence gatherer in that ship, this is what I'm looking at. I think Russia will be looking at these targets from experience as well, guys, because Ukraine have not stopped targeting Russia's own oil and gas facilities across the whole of Russia, which inevitably is going to have an impact on the economy. So to finish off, guys, what can the UK do about these vulnerabilities? So you simply logistically, physically, and financially cannot police all of those cables. And also those pipelines. So there has to be a system in place to help combat those threats. But talking about the cables first, if I was Russia, I'd be taking a leaf out of Ukraine's book first, and then hitting UK gas terminals. I shouldn't even be saying this, but I'm thinking logically. You have to look at both sides of the story, guys. If you're the enemy, what are you looking at in terms of vulnerabilities and targets, potential targets here in the UK? You've got to look at that so we can understand what those possibilities are. But the Russians have got to take a leaf out of the Ukrainians' book and hitting the UK gas terminals and other critical infrastructure conventionally with drones. Okay, that's what Ukraine are doing. They're doing it successfully. The West, since this war has started, has definitely invested heavily into drone warfare, technology, and countermeasures, so that one would expect such mechanisms to be in place in and around those terminals to counteract such threats. And when I say threats, that's drones. But who knows? I don't know. I don't work for any of these agencies of government or the military. That's just for me. I'm thinking logically and I'm applying some sort of common sense. So I would have drone defense mechanisms in and around those tier one sites. Have they got them? I don't know. Right, finally, distributed acoustic sensing, or DAS technology. It exists to improve the security of underwater infrastructure. So it's DAS or DAS. DAS uses the optical fibers already present within the cables to create an extensive network of they're sensitive detectors capable of monitoring these assets in real time. So in those cables, there are other fiber optic cables that are not being used for data. They're kind of redundant and used for this kind of thing. But in simple terms, guys, a device, or what they call an optoelectronic interrogator, it sits at the fiber optic cable landing end. So that's going to be at your beach stations, where said cables, connect to the land infrastructure, a little bit like the electricity substation. So the device injects what they call pulsed laser energy into the fiber optic cable. And then basically what it's doing is just analyzing and it's looking for what they call backscattering. Basically what that is a disruption within the pulse, and that will signify any sort of vibrations and disturbance on the cable, highlighting that something unusual is happening on that cable. More base ports around the UK, and I don't know, but they should have cable spares needed for repairs, ready to use by contracts. That is, that won't be the military. Cable repair ships, I would expect there to be at the ready with highly sort of trained and seasoned crews, which are typically required to sort of sail within the 24 hours notice out to the faults. Faults do happen anyway, with or without sort of war and conflict sort of potential. It's mainly the fishing ships and anchoring, so that they're prone to be damaging these cables. In peacetime, though, this is the last bit, guys. 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and we're done. But in peacetime, repairs able or repair ables is sort of normally feasible and done within sort of impressive efficiency. So just in normal times. But in wartime, however, I didn't know this actually, but accessing cable faults is a major challenge, and that is because state practice and international law around the world, not everywhere, but in some countries, have consistently held that the submarine cables The cable repair ships and cable landing stations are actually legitimate military targets. That's something I didn't know that, guys. So you could get a call to go out and repair a fault, sort of 50 miles off of the coast of Scotland, only to be taken out by, or taken out as a military target. So putting this threat aside just for a minute, the more concerning news hitting the mainstream and giving the articles traction, as I said at the beginning of the video, is the use of these lasers being used and pointed at RAF pilots attending the area. These are lasers being pointed at the pilots from the Yantar vessel itself, so a direct provocation. But guys, this is war, it's hybrid or not. It's like being sat at the back of the classroom and flicking balls of paper at the back of somebody's head. It's just being a pain in the ass. That ship, has been tracked for years and years and years, and that's all it is. It's just being a pain in the ass. So, in summary, we're currently at war, whether that be hybrid, electronic, or information warfare with Russia. The UK, albeit supporting Ukraine in the conventional war, the UK isn't currently at war conventionally with Russia. So, such activity should be expected. These are threats that others on the other channels, and even mainstream have been talking about over the last 2 to 3 years. Guys, for the UK, putting aside any conventional attack in the form of a ballistic missile, a much bigger threat actually is in the form of hybrid warfare. We've been talking about it for probably a good year or so now, and the sabotage of these cables. Conventionally, we could be looking at attacks, as I sort of continue, I'll keep mentioning, on both counterforce and countervalue targets. If you are a prepper and you live anywhere near those 5 gas terminals, let me just show you on the screen. You can see this. Let's get rid of that circle. If you live anywhere near these locations, guys, let me just zoom out. Let's just drag that down. There's 5 locations I would be concerned about. Not concerned about, but your prepping requirements are going to change. It's there. Teesside. We've got Yorkshire, Norfolk. This one here, there's nothing in the sea. This is all internal. That's an internal terminal. And possibly something out here. They could be targets. Although just because there's no seabed pipelines doesn't mean that if you didn't take out one of these southern terminals, because that's going to impact your gas delivery to anything inland. If you live anywhere near any of those locations, guys, your preps have to change, because you could feel the effects of a conventional attack. That could be a ballistic missile, and who knows what form that comes in. Okay, guys. Also, as a prepper, only you know how much you guys rely on the internet. Assess what that would look like for you and your family. How much do you rely heavily on the internet to function as a unit? And the best way to do this, guys, is just to turn off your router at home and your mobile phones for a few days, and just see how you get on. See what's impacted, and then work your way around it. The things that can note that you can no longer do, counteract that vulnerability, and just make sure that you can work around it, even if that means grabbing or switching to Starlink, which could resolve many issues for you. If you bank with one of these online banks which don't have any branches locally in your town or your city, that you can just walk into and just withdraw cash from. Also think about having some cash at home. Do an assessment on what you purchase over a 1 to 2 week period. This is an example, guys. What do you purchase over a 1 to 2 week period from the shops? Tally that up. So, for example, 2 weeks shopping for 2 may cost you £300 to £400. So withdraw that amount of cash and just keep it at home. So if your banking system's gone, at least you can go out and still function. When it comes to banking online, bills and shit like that, that actually isn't important, not during an SHTF. When the UK loses the internet, that's probably further down towards the bottom of your list of priorities. Survival has to start at home, guys. So just making sure that you can function and survive as people first has to come first. Guys, these are real threats, and unfortunately, There are many vulnerabilities the UK government has probably not addressed, so just expect the worst and just prepare properly for it in terms of no internet. That's what we're talking about now. And possibly gas. So if you've got no gas, what does that look like for you? Get yourselves military fit and infantry aware, guys, and just keep an ear to the ground and just be prepared.